What if a single moment of anger changed your life forever? For Anya, a struggling waitress at a high-end New York restaurant, that moment came when she saw a man leave an entire feast untouched. She wasn't just mad. She was furious. Little did she know the man she was about to scold wasn't just any customer. He was Julian Croft, the city's most elusive billionaire. This isn't just a story about a waitress and a rich man. It's a story about what happens when two worlds collide, secrets are exposed, and a single act of defiance sparks a chain of events no one could have predicted. The clatter of silver on porcelain was the soundtrack to Anya's life. It was a rhythm she knew by heart, a frantic melody of hurried lunches and extravagant dinners at the Gilded Spoon, one of Manhattan's most pretentious eateries. For 2 years, she had navigated the treacherous landscape of demanding customers, condescending chefs, and the ever-present ache in her feet. At 24, Anya felt more like a machine than a person, a cog in a system designed to cater to the whims of the city's elite. Tonight was no different. The air was thick with the scent of truffle oil and entitlement. Anya moved with practiced grace between tables, her smile a carefully constructed mask that hid the exhaustion seeping into her bones. She was saving every penny for her younger sister's tuition, a promise she had made to their dying mother. That promise was the fuel that kept her going, the reason she tolerated the snide remarks and the pitiful tips. Then he walked in. He wasn't flashy like the usual clientele. No designer logos screamed from his clothes. He wore a simple, well-tailored grey suit, his dark hair slightly disheveled, as if he had just run his hands through it. There was a quiet intensity about him, a stillness that seemed to command attention without demanding it. He was seated at table 7, a prime spot with a view of the city lights. Anya was assigned his table. "Good evening, sir. My name is Anya, and I'll be your server tonight," she said, her voice a smooth, professional purr. The man Julian Croft, though Anya didn't know it yet, merely nodded his eyes, scanning the menu with an unreadable expression. He ordered an astonishing amount of food. The restaurant's most expensive offerings, the Wagyu steak, the lobster thermidor, the truffle-infused risotto, and a bottle of their finest Chateau Margaux. Anya's eyebrows shot up in surprise, but she quickly schooled her features. It wasn't her place to question. She served him with her usual efficiency, placing each dish before him with a flourish. Yet, as the evening wore on, a strange feeling began to creep up on her. He didn't eat. He simply stared at the food, a muscle working in his jaw. He'd occasionally lift his fork, push a piece of lobster around his plate, and then set it down again. The magnificent feast grew cold, a testament to a colossal waste. Anya's initial curiosity curdled into a slow-burning anger. She thought of the meager meal she would have, later the instant noodles she had been surviving on for weeks. She thought of her sister, who was probably studying late into the night, dreaming of a future that seemed impossibly far away. And here was this man, this stranger, treating a fortune's worth of food like it was nothing. When he finally signaled for the check, the plates were virtually untouched. A mountain of perfectly cooked, exquisitely prepared food was destined for the bin. That was the spark that lit the fuse. Anya's training, her professionalism, her desperate need for this job, it all evaporated in a wave of righteous fury. She drew a deep breath, her heart pounding a war drum against her ribs, and walked over to his table. "Sir," she began, her voice tight, "is there a problem with the food?" Julian Croft looked up. his grey eyes meeting hers for the first time. They were startlingly clear, a stormy sea of unspoken emotions. "No, the food is fine." "Then why didn't you eat it?" Anya's voice was sharper now, the carefully constructed mask cracking. "Do you have any idea how much this costs? How many people could have been fed with what you've just wasted?" A flicker of surprise crossed his face, quickly replaced by a cold, unyielding mask. "That is none of your concern." "None of my concern," she scoffed, her voice rising. Other diners were starting to stare. "I see people struggling every day. People who would kill for a meal like this. And you just order it to what? Look at it. This is more than just food. It's a slap in the face to every person who has ever gone hungry." The restaurant manager, a portly man named Mr. Henderson, with a perpetual sneer, rushed over his face a mask of horror. "Anya, what in God's name do you think you're doing?" But Anya couldn't stop. The words tumbled out of her, a torrent of frustration and a deep, gnawing sense of injustice. "I'm doing what's right. This is obscene. It's a disgusting display of wealth and waste, and I, for one, am sick of it." She turned her glare back to the man in the suit. "You should be ashamed of yourself." For a long moment, there was a stunned silence. Mr. Henderson looked like he was about to have a coronary. The other diners were whispering, their faces a mixture of shock and amusement. Julian Croft didn't move. He simply watched her, his expression unreadable. Then a slow, almost imperceptible smile touched his lips. It wasn't a smile of amusement, but of something else. Something Anya couldn't quite decipher. "You're fired, of course," Mr. Henderson sputtered, his jowls trembling with rage. "I quit." Anya shot back. Her chin held high, even though her insides were churning with a cocktail of fear and adrenaline. She ripped her apron off and threw it onto the table next to the untouched feast. With a final withering look at the man in the grey suit, she turned and walked out of the Gilded Spoon, the sound of her own defiant footsteps echoing in the sudden silence. She didn't look back. She couldn't. The future was a terrifying, gaping void. But in that moment, for the first time, in a long time, Anya felt truly exhilaratingly alive. She had no idea that her life was about to be turned upside down by the very man she had just publicly shamed. The game had just begun. The adrenaline that had coursed through Anya's veins, making her feel invincible, quickly dissipated into the cold, unforgiving New York night. She was left with the chilling reality of her actions. She was jobless with rent due in a week, and a sister who depended on her. The weight of her impulsive decision pressed down on her, a physical ache in her chest. For the next few days, Anya was in a daze. She scoured online job boards, her fingers flying across the keyboard, applying for every waitressing position she could find. But the city was a beast, and there were hundreds of other girls just like her, all vying for the same scraps. One rainy afternoon, as she was nursing a cup of cheap coffee in a dingy diner, her phone rang. The caller ID was an unknown number. She almost ignored it, but a sliver of hope, a desperate, flickering flame, urged her to answer. "Hello. Is this Anya Petrova?" a crisp, professional voice asked. "Yes, who is this?" "My name is Evelyn Reed. I'm the personal assistant to Mr. Julian Croft." Anya's blood ran cold. Julian Croft, the man from the restaurant, the architect of her current misery. "What do you want?" she asked, her voice laced with suspicion. "Mr. Croft would like to meet with you. He was impressed by your candor the other night." "Impressed?" Anya almost laughed. The man had her fired, and now he was impressed. "I have nothing to say to him. He is prepared to offer you a proposition that you might find advantageous. Evelyn Reed continued, her tone unwavering. He has instructed me to tell you that he understands your financial situation and that this meeting could be the solution to all your problems. Anya was torn. Her pride screamed at her to hang up, to tell this woman exactly what she thought of her boss. But the mention of her financial situation hit a nerve. He knew. Of course he knew. A man like that could find out anything he wanted. Where she asked, her voice barely a whisper. The address was for a skyscraper in the heart of the financial district, a gleaming monolith of glass and steel that seemed to pierce the heavens. The headquarters of Croft Enterprises. Anya had walked past it 100 times, never once imagining she would ever set foot inside. The next day, dressed in her only decent blazer, Anya walked into the lobby of Croft Enterprises. It was a cathedral of wealth, with marble floors, soaring ceilings, and a sense of hushed importance that made her feel small and out of place. Evelyn Reed, a woman who looked like she had been carved from ice, greeted her and led her to a private elevator. The ride up was silent, the only sound the soft hum of the machinery. They arrived at the top floor, the penthouse office. The office was bigger than her entire apartment. One wall was made entirely of glass, offering a breathtaking panoramic view of the city. And there, sitting behind a massive mahogany desk, was Julian Croft. He looked different from how she remembered him in the restaurant. The dim lighting had hidden the sharp intelligence in his eyes, the subtle lines of stress around his mouth. He looked powerful. "Miss Petrova," he said, his voice a low, resonant baritone. "Thank you for coming." Anya didn't answer. She stood before him, her arms crossed, a shield against the intimidating aura he exuded. "Please sit," he said, gesturing to a chair. She remained standing. A faint smile played on his lips. "I understand you're looking for a new job." "Thanks to you," she retorted. "And I have one to offer you," he continued, ignoring her jibe. "A unique opportunity." He leaned forward, his grey eyes locking onto hers. "I want you to run the Gilded Spoon." Anya stared at him dumbfounded. "You want me to?" "What, I own the restaurant, Miss Petrova. Or rather, I did. I bought it yesterday. And now I am offering it to you." The world seemed to tilt on its axis. Anya's mind reeled, struggling to process his words. Why she finally managed to choke out, "Why would you do that?" "Because you were right," he said, his voice quiet but firm. "What I did was wasteful, obscene. You called me out on it, something no one has dared to do in a very long time. You have a fire in you, Miss Petrova, a passion for what is right. And that is a quality I admire." He stood up and walked over to the window, his back to her. "I've become detached from the world. I'm surrounded by people who tell me what I want to hear, who cater to my every whim. You, on the other hand, you were honest. Brutally so." He turned to face her again. "I am giving you the restaurant, no strings attached. You will have full creative control. You can change the menu, the staff, whatever you see fit. The only thing I ask is that you make it a place where no food is ever wasted." Anya was speechless. This was insane. It had to be a trick, a cruel joke. "What's the catch?" "There is no catch," he said. "Consider it an apology. And an investment in you." He slid a folder across his desk. "The paperwork is all there. My lawyers are at your disposal. The restaurant is yours." Anya slowly walked to the desk and picked up the folder. Her hands trembled as she opened it. Inside were legal documents, deeds, contracts. It was all real. She looked up at him, her mind a whirlwind of confusion and disbelief. I don't know what to say. Say you'll do it, he said, his voice softer now. Say you'll take this chance and build something better. Anya looked out at the city, the endless sea of lights stretching out before her. Just a few days ago, she had been a struggling waitress, invisible to the world. Now she was being handed a kingdom. It was a terrifying, exhilarating prospect. She thought of her sister, of her mother's promise. This was more than just a job. It was a lifeline, a chance to not just survive, but to thrive. She met his gaze, her own eyes filled with a new, steely determination. I'll do it. A genuine smile finally broke through his stoic facade, transforming his face, making him look younger, more human. I had a feeling you would. As Anya left his office, the folder clutched in her hand like a holy relic. She couldn't shake the feeling that she had just made a deal with the devil. But as she stepped out into the city, the rain having finally stopped, she saw a rainbow arcing across the sky. Maybe, just maybe, this was her pot of gold. The real story, she was beginning to realize, was just getting started. And it was going to be one hell of a ride. The gilded spoon, once a symbol of everything Anya despised, was now her dominion. The irony was not lost on her. The first time she walked back into the restaurant, not as a waitress, but as its owner, the feeling was surreal. The staff, her former colleagues, stared at her with a mixture of awe and disbelief. Mr. Henderson, in particular, looked like he had swallowed a lemon. Anya's first act as the new owner was to call a staff meeting. She stood before them not with the arrogance of a new boss, but with the quiet confidence of a leader. I know this is a shock to all of you, she began, her voice steady. And I know what you're thinking. But I'm not here to settle scores. I'm here to make a change. She outlined her vision for the restaurant. A new menu focused on locally sourced, seasonal ingredients. A partnership with a local food bank to donate all surplus food. A fair wage for all staff members with a share of the profits. The initial skepticism from the staff slowly gave way to a grudging respect, and then to genuine enthusiasm. For the first time, they felt like they were part of something meaningful, not just cogs in a machine. Mr. Henderson, however, was not on board. He scoffed at her ideas, calling them naive and unprofitable. This is a business, Miss Petrova. Not a charity, he sneered. You're right, it is a business, Anya replied calmly. And as the owner of this business, I am exercising my right to run it as I see fit. You can either be a part of this new chapter, or you can find employment elsewhere. Faced with this ultimatum, Mr. Henderson, after a moment of sputtering indignation, chose the latter. His departure was a symbolic victory for Anya, a clear sign that the old ways were over. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of activity. Anya worked tirelessly redesigning the menu, with the head chef, forging partnerships with local farmers, and overseeing a complete rebranding of the restaurant. The Gilded Spoon was no more. In its place was Anya's Table, a name that was both personal and inviting. Julian Croft remained a silent partner, a ghost in the machine. He never visited the restaurant, never called. The only sign of his involvement was the steady flow of capital into the restaurant's accounts, a silent testament to his faith in her. Anya was both grateful for his absence and unnerved by it. She couldn't shake the feeling that he was watching her from afar, a silent observer in her grand experiment. One evening, as she was locking up a sleek black car pulled up to the curb, the window rolled down and there he was, Julian Croft, his face illuminated by the soft glow of the dashboard lights. "Get in," he said, his voice a low command. Anya hesitated for a moment, then complied. The car was a cocoon of luxury, the scent of leather and old money filling her senses. "Where are we going?" she asked, as the car pulled away from the curb. "To see the other side of the city," he replied, his eyes fixed on the road ahead. They drove for what felt like an eternity, leaving the glittering spires of Manhattan behind and venturing into the forgotten corners of the city, the neighborhoods that the tourists never saw. They stopped in front of a run-down building, a homeless shelter that Anya recognized from her volunteer work. "What are we doing here?" she asked, a sense of unease creeping up on her. "I wanted to show you something," he said, his voice uncharacteristically soft. They got out of the car and walked into the shelter. The air was thick with the smell of disinfectant and despair. The faces of the people there were etched with hardship, their eyes hollow with a deep, abiding sadness. And then Anya saw it. In the corner of the room, a group of children were gathered around a table, their faces alight with a rare, unadulterated joy. They were eating. And not just any food. It was the surplus from Anya's table, the unsold bread, the extra portions of stew, the slightly bruised but still perfectly good fruit. A lump formed in Anya's throat. She had known in an abstract way where the donated food was going, but to see it, to witness the impact it was having, was something else entirely. She turned to Julian, her eyes shining with unshed tears. You arranged this." He nodded. "I wanted you to see that what you're doing matters. It's more than just a restaurant, Anya. It's a beacon of hope." In that moment, under the flickering fluorescent lights of the homeless shelter, Anya saw a different side of Julian Croft. The cold, aloof billionaire was gone. In his place was a man who, for all his wealth and power, seemed to be searching for something more. Something real. As they drove back to the city, a comfortable silence settled between them. Anya finally mustered the courage to ask the question that had been burning in her mind since the day she met him. "Why did you really give me the restaurant, Julian?" He was silent for a long moment, his gaze fixed on the city lights blurring past. When he finally spoke, his voice was heavy, with a sadness that seemed to come from a place deep within him. "Because I was once one of them," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "The homeless, the hungry. I know what it's like to have nothing. To be invisible." Anya stared at him, stunned. The billionaire, the man who had everything, had once been a street kid, a forgotten soul in the city's unforgiving landscape. It was a revelation that changed everything. The story of Julian Croft, she was beginning to understand, was far more complex than she could have ever imagined, and her own story, she now realized, was inextricably linked with his. The waitress and the billionaire. Their lives had collided in the most unexpected of ways, setting off a chain reaction that would force them both to confront their pasts and redefine their futures. The drama was far from over. In fact, it had only just begun. Julian's confession lingered in the opulent silence of the car, a ghost that fundamentally altered the space between them. Anya saw him not as the imposing billionaire from the penthouse office, but as the invisible boy he had once been. The revelation was a key unlocking a door to a part of him he kept hidden from the world. "Tell me," she urged, her voice soft an invitation rather than a demand. He took a deep, shuddering breath, his knuckles white on the steering wheel. My mother, she was beautiful. She loved music and she smelled like lavender. But she got sick, an illness the doctors couldn't name and couldn't fix. Towards the end, she couldn't eat. Her body just rejected it. I was 8 years old, and I would watch her waste away this plate of food sitting by her bedside untouched. It was the smell I remember most, the smell of food going bad, while the person you love most in the world is starving. He paused, the muscle in his jaw working overtime. After she died, I was bounced around the system. Foster homes. Some were just neglectful, others were worse. Hunger was a constant, that gnawing, hollow feeling in your stomach that never goes away. I promised myself that one day I would never be hungry again, that I would be so rich I could walk into any restaurant and order anything I wanted. Anya's heart ached for him. The gilded spoon, she whispered. He nodded, a bitter smile touching his lips. It was my Everest, the ultimate symbol that I had made it. So I went there that night to finally conquer the ghost of that hungry kid. I ordered everything I had ever dreamed of eating. And then it arrived. The smell, the sight of all that food, it wasn't a victory. It was a tombstone. All I could see was my mother's face, that untouched plate by her bed. I couldn't swallow a single bite. It felt like a betrayal of her memory. He finally turned to look at her, his grey eyes shimmering with unshed tears. And then you came over. You had this fire in your eyes. You saw the waste, the obscenity of it, and you weren't afraid to say it. You were the only real person in that entire room. You were my conscience. By the time they reached her small apartment in Queens, the sky was blushing with the first light of dawn. Anya's world had been reshaped. The chasm between them, once seemingly insurmountable, had been bridged by a shared understanding of loss and survival. In the weeks that followed, their fragile connection blossomed. It was a courtship conducted in the quiet corners of the city, away from the prying eyes of his world and the demands of hers. He took her to the old, dusty reading room at the New York Public Library, where he'd spent countless hours as a teenager, teaching himself to code from borrowed books, hiding from the cold. She saw the boy he was then, full of fierce intelligence and desperate hope. In return, she told him about her sister Mia, about their shared dream of opening a small bakery one day, a place filled with the smell of fresh bread and the warmth of family. He listened with an intensity that made her feel seen in a way she never had before. He was seeing the woman she was beyond the waitress, beyond the sudden restaurant owner. But their private world couldn't stay private for long. The story of the mysterious billionaire and the fiery waitress was too good for the tabloids to ignore. They were christened the Beauty and the Billionaire. Paparazzi seemed to materialize out of thin air. One afternoon, as they were walking through Central Park, laughing over a shared hot dog, a simple pleasure Julian hadn't allowed himself in years. The sudden blinding flash of cameras descended upon them. Julian's reaction was instantaneous. He became a fortress, his body shielding hers, his face hardening into the cold mask she remembered from their first meeting. The incident left her shaken, a harsh reminder of the gilded cage that came with his fortune. The true test arrived with a thick, cream-colored envelope, an invitation to the annual Metropolitan Foundation Gala. It was the social event of the season. "We don't have to go," Julian said, sensing her hesitation. But Anya, tired of hiding, saw it as a chance to step out of the shadows, to stand by his side as his partner, not his project. The night of the gala, Anya felt like she was playing dress-up. The borrowed designer gown felt alien on her skin, the diamonds around her neck like beautiful cold chains. The ballroom was a dizzying kaleidoscope of power and wealth, and at the center of it all, holding court like a queen, was a woman of breathtaking beauty, with raven black hair and eyes that missed nothing. "That's Isabella Rossi," Julian murmured, his voice tight. "Her family were early investors in my company. We were engaged a long time ago." The casual bombshell landed with the force of a physical blow. Before Anya could process it, Isabella was gliding towards them, her smile a dazzling, predatory thing. She kissed the air by Julian's cheek, but her eyes, cold and assessing, were locked on Anya. "Julian, darling, I was beginning to think you'd become a complete hermit," she purred, her voice like silk draped over steel. "And you must be Anya. The whole city is talking about you. Julian's little Cinderella." Later that evening, seeking a moment's respite, Anya slipped into the lavishly decorated powder room. She was reapplying her lipstick when the door opened and Isabella entered her reflection, joining Anya's in the mirror. The friendly facade was gone. "Let's cut the charade, shall we?" Isabella began, her voice low and venomous. "You've played your part beautifully, I'll admit. The plucky, righteous waitress. It's a compelling narrative. Julian has always had a weakness for strays." Anya's hand stilled. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Oh, please," Isabella scoffed, turning to face her fully. "Do you honestly think you're the first Julian collects broken things? It makes him feel powerful to fix them. He'll pour money into you, build you up, make you believe you're special. He needs that validation. But once you're no longer broken, he'll lose interest. The challenge will be gone." She leaned closer, her expensive perfume cloying. "He is a man haunted by ghosts, little girl. He can't love anyone because he doesn't even love himself. He is incapable of it. He will break your heart, not out of malice, but because it's the only thing he knows how to do. He will let you fall and he won't even notice you've hit the ground. Save yourself the humiliation. Enjoy the restaurant. Take the money. But don't for a second believe you can have his heart. That's a place not even he can find." Every word was a perfectly aimed dart, striking at the heart of Anya's deepest insecurities, that she wasn't good enough, that she was an imposter in this glittering world, that Julian's affection was just another form of charity. Numb. Anya walked back into the ballroom. Her eyes immediately found Julian. He was standing near the French doors leading to the terrace, deep in conversation with Isabella. Isabella's hand was on his arm, and she was laughing a triumphant, intimate sound. Julian wasn't smiling, but he wasn't pulling away either. He looked trapped, conflicted. But all Anya could see was a confirmation of Isabella's words. The fairy tale shattered. The beautiful ballroom felt like a prison, the music a funeral dirge. The man she was starting to fall for was a stranger, his past, a web of secrets she was only just beginning to see. And she was just another fly caught and struggling in the unraveling threads. Isabella's words were a poison that seeped into the cracks of Anya's confidence, a slow-acting venom that tainted everything. On the surface, Anya's table was a phenomenal success. The reservations were booked weeks in advance. The city's top food bloggers sang its praises, and the atmosphere buzzed with the energy of a place that had captured the heart of New York. Anya should have been ecstatic. Instead, she felt like a fraud, the star of a play she hadn't written. Each compliment felt like a lie, each glowing review a reminder of Isabella's sneering voice, He'll build you up just to watch you fall. The sabotage began subtly, a series of unfortunate events that could almost be dismissed as bad luck. A glowing review from the city's most influential food critic, one that would have solidified the restaurant's A-list status, was suddenly and inexplicably pulled the night before publication. The critic's editor cited a conflict of interest, a vague and unsatisfying explanation that smelled of backroom deals and old money influence. Then came the suppliers. Their long-time organic farmer, a man who had supplied them with their signature heirloom tomatoes since day one, abruptly terminated their contract. He was apologetic but firm, mentioning a new exclusive and incredibly lucrative deal he couldn't refuse. Anya knew with a sickening certainty who had orchestrated it. Scrambling, she was forced to source from a larger, less personal distributor, the quality dipping just enough for her to notice for the new anxiety in her chest to tighten its grip. The attacks grew more brazen. One frantic Friday night, 2 health inspectors arrived for a surprise inspection, acting on an anonymous tip about a rodent infestation. They moved through her pristine kitchen with an almost gleeful sense of purpose, their flashlights probing every corner. Anya's head chef, a fiery but loyal man named Marco, nearly came to blows with them. Anya, her heart pounding, managed the situation with a calm she didn't feel her professionalism, a thin veneer over a core of pure rage. They found nothing, of course, but the damage was done. Whispers rippled through the staff, their confidence in her leadership shaken. Was she in over her head? Julian, sensing her distress, tried to break through the wall she was building around herself. He would call his voice laced with a concern that now sounded like pity to her ears. He would send gifts to the restaurant, extravagant bouquets of flowers that felt less like tokens of affection and more like brandings of ownership. He was bewildered by her retreat, and his confusion only made her pull away further. The easy intimacy they had shared, the late-night talks and shared vulnerabilities, was replaced by a chasm of unspoken suspicions. The final devastating blow landed on a crisp autumn morning. Anya was walking to work when she saw it displayed prominently on a newsstand, the headline screaming at her in bold black letters. The Billionaire's charity case. How a waitress cooked the books and a billionaire's heart. Her blood ran cold. She bought the paper, her hands trembling so badly she could barely unfold it. The article was a masterpiece of character assassination. It twisted her story, painting her as a conniving, ambitious shrew who had preyed on a lonely, vulnerable billionaire. It hinted at financial mismanagement at the restaurant and suggested her charitable food donations were a tax evasion scheme. The anonymous source, quoted extensively, was identified only as a source close to the Croft family, who fears for Mr. Croft's emotional and financial well-being. It was Isabella's voice, her venom disguised as concern. The public humiliation was immediate and brutal. The phone at the restaurant began ringing off the hook with cancellations. Walking down the street, she felt the stares, heard the whispers. She was no longer Anya Petrova, the plucky girl who made good. She was a tabloid villain, a gold digger. That night she stormed into Croft Enterprises, the newspaper clutched in her fist like a weapon. She didn't wait to be announced. She blew past a stunned Evelyn Reed and burst into Julian's office. He was standing by the window, looking out at the city that was now judging her. He turned as she entered his face, a mask of pain. "Anya, I am so sorry," he began. She threw the newspaper onto his vast mahogany desk. It landed with a sickening slap. "Sorry? Is that all you have to say?" She demanded, her voice shaking with rage and heartbreak. "Is this part of the grand experiment, Julian? Build up the charity case and then watch as the world tears her down. Was that the plan all along? Of course not. I would never. Then stop her. Anya cried, her control finally snapping. This is Isabella. We both know it. That's her voice, her words. She warned me this would happen. She told me you would let her do it. So stop her, Julian. Tell the world she's a liar. He looked trapped, a storm of conflict in his grey eyes. He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture of pure desperation. It's not that simple, Anya. Not that simple. She scoffed, a bitter laugh escaping her lips. Why? Because she owns a piece of your company. Because her family's money is tied up in yours. That's what this is about, isn't it? You're choosing your empire over me. That's not what I'm doing, he insisted, taking a step towards her. You don't understand the complexities, the dynamics at play. That was the final blow. You don't understand. The patronizing words, the dismissal of her reality. He was putting her back in her place, the little waitress who couldn't possibly comprehend his world of power and privilege. The last bit of hope in her heart withered and died. The betrayal was complete, an ice-cold certainty that settled deep in her bones. I see, she said, her voice suddenly flat, devoid of all emotion. The fire was gone, replaced by a chilling emptiness. She looked at him, at this man. She thought she knew this man. She thought she might be falling in love with, and saw a stranger. A coward. She was right about you. You are damaged. You can't protect anyone because you're too busy protecting yourself. She turned her back straight, her head held high. She walked out of his office, out of his life, and didn't look back. There was nothing left to see. Anya returned to the restaurant. It was dark and silent, a tomb of her shattered dreams. She walked through the dining room, her fingers tracing the edges of the empty tables. This place, once a symbol of her triumph, now felt like the scene of a crime. She collapsed into a chair, the silence pressing in on her, and finally let herself break. She wept not just for the betrayal, but for the foolish, hopeful girl she had been. She sat there for hours as the grief washed over her, cleansing her. And as the first faint hints of dawn began to creep through the windows, something new took its place. The despair burned away, leaving behind a hard, cold, diamond-sharp rage. She was not a victim. She had been used and she had been hurt, but she would not be broken. Giving up would be letting them win. This restaurant wasn't just a gift. She had poured her blood, sweat, and soul into it. It was hers. Her eyes, clear and cold, scanned the darkened room. A new purpose settled over her. She pulled out her phone, her fingers steady as she found the number she had been given weeks ago for a lawyer who specialized in fighting sharks. The next morning, Anya woke up a different woman. She was no longer a naive girl from Queens caught in a fairy tale. She was a fighter, and she was ready to go to war. The war began not with a bang, but with the quiet, methodical rustle of paper. Anya's lawyer, Catherine Cat Bennett, was a shark in a designer suit, with a reputation for eviscerating her opponents in the courtroom. In their initial strategy sessions, surrounded by towering stacks of documents in Cat's sterile, intimidatingly modern office, Anya felt a flicker of hope. Isabella's mistake, Cat explained, tapping a perfectly manicured finger on a highlighted document, is that she's arrogant. She thinks her money and influence make her untouchable. Our job is to prove her wrong. The legal battle was a war of attrition. Isabella's legal team, a phalanx of the city's most expensive lawyers, buried them in motions depositions and discovery requests. They were designed to exhaust Anya, to bleed her dry financially and emotionally. There were days when Anya felt the weight of it all pressing down on her, a suffocating blanket of legalese and intimidation. She would stare at the mounting legal bills and feel the familiar grip of panic. But then she would think of her sister, of her promise of the children at the shelter, and the fire in her belly would ignite anew. Julian, meanwhile, was trapped in his own gilded cage. He was a king in self-imposed exile, watching the battle from the cold, sterile comfort of his penthouse. His attempts to intervene were expertly blocked by Isabella. She held her shares in Croft Enterprises like a guillotine over his head, threatening a hostile takeover, a corporate war that would destroy the empire he had built from nothing. "Stay out of it, Julian," she had hissed at him during one tense phone call, her voice dripping with venom. "This is between me and the little waitress. Don't make me choose between my love for you and my love for this company." His inaction was a poison seeping into every corner of his life. He stopped going to the office. Board meetings were missed. Billion-dollar deals were ignored. His empire, once a symbol of his triumph over his past, now felt like a mausoleum. He wandered the silent, cavernous rooms of his apartment, the ghost of Anya's laughter echoing in the emptiness. He was surrounded by priceless art, but the only image he saw was her face, her eyes flashing with defiance in the dim light of the gilded spoon. The breaking point came on a cold, rainy night, a pathetic echo of the night his life had collided with hers. Driven by a desperation he could no longer contain, he found himself outside the homeless shelter. He hesitated at the door, a man who could buy the entire city block, yet felt he had no right to enter. Taking a deep breath, he pushed the door open. The air inside was thick with the smell of damp wool and cheap soup, a smell that was achingly familiar. He saw the tired faces, the haunted eyes, and for the first time in a long time, he didn't feel pity. He felt a profound sense of kinship. He saw a young boy, no older than he had been when he first hit the streets, sitting alone in a corner, clutching a piece of bread. It was bread from Anya's table. Julian walked over and sat down next to the boy. "Is it good?" he asked, his voice hoarse. The boy looked up, his eyes wide, with a mixture of fear and curiosity. He nodded, taking a small bite. "It's the best bread in the world," he whispered. In that moment, under the flickering fluorescent lights, surrounded by the ghosts of his own past, Julian Croft finally broke. The carefully constructed walls he had built around his heart crumbled into dust. This was real. This mattered. Not the stock prices, not the corporate power plays, not the empty praise of sycophants. This simple act of kindness, this beacon of hope that Anya had created. His wealth wasn't a shield, it was a tool, and he had been using it all wrong. The next morning, Julian Croft went to war. He called his longtime assistant, Evelyn Reed. "Call a press conference," he said, his voice ringing with a clarity and purpose that had been absent for months. "And Evelyn, get me a list of every homeless shelter and food bank in the 5 boroughs." The news of a press conference sent the media into a feeding frenzy. The reclusive billionaire, the man who hadn't spoken to the press in over a decade, was finally emerging from his castle. He stood before the blinding flash of the cameras, not in one of his impeccably tailored suits, but in a simple, dark sweater. He looked tired, but his eyes burned with a new fire. He didn't read from a prepared statement. He spoke from the heart. He told them everything. He spoke of a lonely, hungry boy on the streets of New York, of a dying mother of a dream that had turned into a nightmare. He laid his soul bare for the world to see his voice, cracking with an emotion he no longer tried to suppress. And then he looked directly into the cameras, as if he was speaking to Anya herself. "I failed her," he said, his voice raw with regret. "In my fear, in my weakness, I let my past control me, and I hurt the one person who saw me for who I truly was. Anya Petrova is not a gold digger. She is not an opportunist. She is a woman of integrity, of compassion, and of a strength that I can only admire. She is the best of me." The room was silent, the hardened, cynical reporters stunned into submission. And then he dropped the final bombshell. "Effective immediately, I am stepping down as CEO of Croft Enterprises. I will be liquidating a significant portion of my personal assets to establish a new charitable foundation. The Petrova Foundation, dedicated to eradicating hunger and homelessness in this city. It will be my life's new work, and I have asked its namesake, Miss Anya Petrova, to serve as its executive director." The aftermath was swift and brutal. The news exploded across the city, a seismic event that reshaped the landscape of power. Isabella Rossi's world imploded. The board of Croft Enterprises, emboldened by Julian's public stand, forced her out. Her fair-weather friends in high society abandoned her. Her name became synonymous with disgrace. She withdrew the lawsuit, a final desperate act of self-preservation, and vanished, a fallen queen, in a kingdom of her own making. Anya watched the press conference on a small television in Kat's office, her hand clasped over her mouth, tears streaming down her face. Kat put a comforting arm around her. "I think we can officially call this one a win," she said, a rare, genuine smile on her face. A few days later, Julian was waiting for her outside Anya's table. The restaurant was bathed in the warm glow of the evening sun, a sanctuary of her own making. He looked different lighter. The ghosts in his eyes had been banished. He looked free. "I came to say goodbye," he said softly. Anya's heart clenched. "Goodbye. Where are you going?" "I don't know." He admitted a faint, self-deprecating smile on his lips. "For the first time in my life, I don't have a plan. I'm going to travel. Volunteer. Figure out who Julian Croft is without the billions. I need to earn the right to be the man you thought I was." He took a step closer, taking her hands in his. They were warm, strong. "You have a foundation to run a city to change. You don't need me for that. You never did." His stormy grey eyes were full of a love so profound, so absolute, it took her breath away. "You taught me that, Anya. You taught me how to be human again." He leaned in and kissed her. It wasn't a kiss of passion, but of a deep, abiding reverence. It was a kiss full of unspoken promises of a future that was yet to be written. And then, with a final, lingering look, he turned and walked away, a solitary figure melting into the vibrant, chaotic tapestry of the city. Anya stood there for a long time, the warmth of his kiss still on her lips. She didn't know if or when she would see him again, but a quiet certainty settled in her heart. This wasn't an ending. It was a new beginning. She turned and looked at her restaurant, at the warm, inviting lights of Anya's table. She had a foundation to build a city, to feed a future to forge. The Waitress and the Billionaire. Their story wasn't a fairy tale. It was a testament to the fact that even the most broken souls could find redemption, that a single act of defiance could spark a revolution, and that true love wasn't about finding the perfect person, but about building a better world together. And their story, she knew, was just getting started. Anya and Julian's story is a powerful reminder that our past doesn't have to define our future. It's a testament to the fact that one person with enough courage and conviction can spark a revolution, not just in their own life, but in the lives of everyone around them. Their journey, filled with unexpected twists and turns, shows us that true wealth isn't measured in dollars, but in kindness, compassion, and the courage to fight for what is right. If their story touched your heart, if it made you believe in the power of second chances, then please take a moment to like this video, share it with your friends, and subscribe to our channel for more stories that inspire that challenge and that remind us of the incredible, resilient power of the human spirit. Thank you for watching.